my knowledge, we've got one participant at this point in time, so we'll be doing this for posterity through recording. Is that correct?
Yes, we are recording,
Great.
and I've started recording, and we'll get things started. Well, thanks for
All right.
joining us today. My name's Jasper with Score Maine. I'm joined by Jamie Lewis, one of our certified mentors, and we will be joined by Kelsey Kobick of the Maine Federations of Farmers Markets. We're here today to talk about how to join a Maine farmers market. As always, we are sponsored by the Maine Technology Institute, a incubator and sponsor of many businesses in Maine. Either way, Jamie, why don't you get things started?
Well, great. Thanks, Jasper. I appreciate it. Well, if you're watching this or on the call today, you realize, or maybe you don't realize, that farmers markets are very important to the Maine economy. There are about 140 farmers markets currently active in Maine. 115 are mostly seasonal summertime markets, and another 30 to 35 are year-round or winter markets. So it's a very important piece of the economy. It provides local jobs, but even importantly, it provides good, healthy eating options that you might not find in a grocery store with highly processed fruits and vegetables, or things that travel for weeks before they end up in the on your grocery shelf. So farmers markets are incredibly important to us here in Maine. And again, as Jasper mentioned, it's hosted by SCORE and the Maine Farmers Market Federation. So thanks for joining us. So a little bit of background initially. My name is Jamie Lewis. I'm a SCORE mentor. I've been involved with SCORE for about 6 years at this point in time, and also have participated for several years now as a vendor to farmers markets. And very briefly, SCORE is a nationwide organization. We have a very strong organization here in Maine with about 150 mentors. And basically, SCORE provides free, almost unlimited mentoring to our SCORE clients. We have real time, such as this webinar, um, in person, national, local webinars. And if you go to our website, score.com, there is a treasure trove of archived webinars and just a ton of information about everything having to do with multiple stages of business and different aspects of business. So SCORE is a great resource, and we greatly enjoy mentoring. I'll speak for Kelsey, who hasn't joined quite yet. Kelsey works with the Maine Federation of Farmers Markets, which I'll get to in the next slide. Uh, there we go. So co-host here is the Maine Federation of Farmers Markets. They basically are the collective organization that runs statewide programs that help sustain Maine farms, connect farmers markets, strengthen farmers markets, and widen access to locally grown food for all. It's a 501(c)(3). It's a nonprofit. They have nothing to do with regulation, although they are certainly an advocate in Augusta for all things having to do with Maine farms and farmers markets. And it's a membership organization, so it's supported with uh, somewhat minimal annual dues, monthly dues from the Maine farmers markets, of which there are many in the state. And if you go to the website, anything that's not covered here today, which there's a substantial amount of information we won't be covering today. If you go to mainefarmersmarkets.org, it's just an amazing website with tremendous depth from all aspects of what it takes to start a farmer's market and what it takes to be a vendor at farmers markets. So I highly, highly recommend going to this website. They do a great job, and they've been very supportive of farmers and farmers markets. So our agenda today, questions: why do you want to join a farmers markets? I'm sure it's gone through everyone's minds, which is why they're on this call. And I see Kelsey has joined. I'll take 1 second. Kelsey, do you want to introduce yourself very quickly? Well, she's muted right now. Well, I'll go ahead and there we go. Oh,
Hi.
Kelsey, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. I'm so sorry I'm late. I had problems with the Zoom launching, but I'm here now. I'm Kelsey Kobick. I'm the communications and marketing specialist at the Maine Federation of Farmers Markets. I think Jamie's probably already told you guys this, but we're an organization that's here to support farmers markets and direct sales for vendors at farmers markets.
That's great. And Kelsey and I will be ping-ponging back and forth throughout this presentation. She is immediately involved with farmers markets, whereas I am a participant. So she'll be able to add a lot of color to what I might be saying. So first thing, why join a farmers market? The types of farmers markets in Maine, there are three types that we'll get into in a minute. And how to join a farmers market. Again, we'll talk about the highlights and we'll be able to provide more detail down the road. What's needed to participate in the market? Again, the demands of participating in a market are not great, which is why they're so popular and lots of people want to join the markets. How to succeed at a market, which is very important. It takes a little more than just setting up a tent and putting up your wares. There are some subtleties and things you can do that might be obvious to you, but are really important to succeed in a market, i.e. taking home a lot less than what you show up with. Markets that are looking for vendors, and we'll have a Q&A, but I will respond to questions and Kelsey will respond to questions anytime. So don't wait till the end. So if you have a question on a particular slide or something we said, just raise your hand or chime in. So we'll start by talking about why joining a farmer's market. It's perfect for starting and growing or sustaining a business. A lot of people have ideas for products they want to sell, but they really don't have a forum to see whether that's a good product or the market would like that particular product or the type of prepared food or some sort of baking item, that sort of thing. So a farmer's market really gives a great opportunity to be able to see what the market will say about your product. You don't have to go to the expense of trying to get into a local specialty food store or a supermarket or that sort of thing. So it's a great way to start your business, grow your business, and you may be perfectly happy being a permanent farmer's market person, or convert your business perhaps into a brick and mortar business down the road. The barriers to entry are very low, typically $5 to $40 per market, and that assumes that you're a day table, and we'll get into that a little bit. But rather than being a seasonal member at a farmer's market, there are many markets that accept day tables, and by day table I mean people that just show up for one particular market, or maybe they'll only do 4 markets over the course of the season. And again, $5 is probably on the low end, but anywhere from $20 to $40 is the cost. So that's a very inexpensive way to get your product into the marketplace.
At my market, we call them guest vendors too. You'll find guest vendor as the lingo for some markets.
Great, thanks.
Yeah.
And you make money selling your products directly to the consumer. You're not getting skimmed in the retail process. So if you try and place your product in a specialty store, they will take a healthy cut of the profit. Whereas in the farmer's market, your only direct expense, obviously you can have a tent and that sort of thing. But the money you make selling that loaf of bread or that head of lettuce and the bunch of tomatoes is pretty much going straight into your pocket. It's also a chance to develop and grow your brand. You've got everybody that walks into your tent is a test case, and if they come back or they suggest maybe other things, perhaps it's a way to really develop what your product offering is to the marketplace. You have almost instant feedback in many circumstances, and believe me, your customers like to chat with you in many cases. And we'll talk about this a little further, but it's a fine line between gracefully closing out a conversation with someone in your tent while someone else is looking to buy some stuff. So it's a great way to develop a brand, and also trial products with real people. Tastings, I referenced that earlier, is You put your product out there. A lot of people will buy it on a sample basis because you'll typically find people that go to farmers markets are very inquisitive and they're very supportive of the concept of farmers markets, and they're supportive of the concept of an entrepreneur out there trying to sell their product. So you'll find a lot of people may buy or taste just about anything. And I'm an example of that. I love going to farmers markets, not only as a vendor, but as a consumer. And you can learn from other vendors. That's probably one of the greatest teachers involved with farmers markets is um, learning how other people do things, learning how other people set up their displays. And sometimes if you are bringing a partner to the market to man your tent, in many instances when things are slow, you can wander through the market and just observe how other people are doing things and develop relationships with the other vendors. And everyone's generally are very sharing of what works, what's good. And again, that leads into the next slide, be a part of a fun community. The people that bring their products as vendors to farmers markets enjoy what they do. And it really is a good community because the success of a farmer's market is based on the vendors that show up and their ability to continue to sell their product and want to continue to show up. So you really form a community of like-minded vendors who want the market to be successful. And the old rising tide floats many boats. That concept is really applicative for a farmer's market also because the more vendors at the market, the greater the diverse product offerings, and that will attract more people. And if you have a farmer's market with just, 4 or 5 vendors, there's less opportunity to attract more people that are willing to go to the market and spend their money. And then networking, make new business contacts, grow the email list. Networking is really important. You might not think that is an element of farmers markets, but networking with the fellow vendors and also networking with some of your customers. Again, we'll talk about it a little later on, but being outgoing and engaging your customers without being pushy, but we'll discuss that a little bit further on. And this is a short list. Many successful food businesses have their starts at markets. Burt's Bees, Stonewall Kitchen, 30-acre farm. You could put a huge laundry list together of businesses that started at farmers markets. And my other comment is that is not the goal of every vendor at a farmer's market to start a bricks and mortar business somewhere down the line or get bigger. Many vendors are more than satisfied with being consistent farmers markets participants throughout the year. So it's not the mentality of having to grow into bricks and mortar or grow into a bigger business is not necessarily the goal of every single vendor at a farmer's market, but the opportunity certainly is there to build a business and then, if you're so inclined, to move into bricks and mortar or, get into a different distribution model where you might want to try and penetrate specialty markets or even, as some farmers market vendors have done in the past, penetrate the Hannafords of the world and the Rosemonts of the world and that sort of thing.
Yeah, there are vegetable vendors who make multiple $1 million a year in sales just doing farmers markets in Maine. And of course, how much profit are they making? Not much, but there's certainly potential for sales, even for something like vegetables, to sustain your business just at the market.
And the types of markets, farmers markets are defined by Maine state law. We don't need to go into it, but it's the emphasis on farmers is critical. And the other piece is the emphasis on local Maine grown foods. I believe I think it's a state law, but certainly most farmers markets require at least 75% of the consumable product, fruits, vegetables, anything made with anything grown in Maine or developed in Maine. I believe 75% of everything that's sold has to be Maine originated. And typically, if you have a farmer's market with, say, 15 or 20 vendors, at any one of those type markets, you'd probably find half a dozen actual farms selling fruits, vegetables, that sort of thing. But then you'll also have vendors selling local beef, breaded products, that sort of thing. There's a full list of the farmers markets at mainefarmersmarkets.org. But you can see on the slide there's farmers markets everywhere. They become a little sparser further north, but certainly in southern and mid-coast Maine, there's farmers markets everywhere you can possibly look.
And I just wanted to chime in about the law. The farmers market law is to protect the phrase farmers market. So you can only call yourself a farmers market in the state of Maine if you meet the state definition of a farmers market, and that's to protect Maine produced foods and goods. So it really is associated, especially in Maine. When you go to the farmers market, you know you're actually getting Maine food and Maine produced things. I think that's something that we're really proud of, because not all states have that. There are grocery stores in other states that are called farmers markets, and they're not.
And that's a great point. And Kelsey, while you're on that, I know it's MFFM's mission to make sure that the consumers know that. And that's one of the hallmarks of Maine farmers markets, that people know what they're getting and they know they're supporting Maine farmers.
Yeah. You get to talk directly to the actual producer at most farmers markets, and that's something that I think once you start shopping at a farmers market, you get pretty spoiled and people get hooked. And that's certainly a big part of my customer base, is people who really care about how their food is produced and where it comes from. So that's another advantage to being part of that community, is access to that customer base who's already so engaged and who cares.
The types of market, this is probably a little less important. There are basically three types: member run. So that's where all the vendors get together and they govern, and they set up the market, they govern the market, they do it all, and it's controlled 100% by the vendors at the market. And the other two are hybrid models. A community run market is a community thinks it would be a good thing for the community and for the localized farmers to do it together. So you've got a hybrid model that's governed partially by the community, a segment of the community political or administrative hierarchy, and the market members, the vendors. And then the nonprofit run market is run by an external group. And Kelsey, you may have a better feel for this. Of the 140 farmers markets in Maine, are the balance of those member run markets? My gut tells me they are, but you probably have a better handle on the statistic there.
If there are still currently 140, then that number would be 136 are entirely democratically run by vendors themselves. That is another unique thing about Maine farmers markets. In other parts of the country, it's often the kind of thing where somebody owns a big space and rents it out for profit and organizes a market to make more profit off of it. But most markets in Maine are actually run by the vendors themselves, which I love. That for my business, that works really well.
Well, certainly the best interests of the vendors in the market are when the vendors are running them themselves. And typically there is cooperation with the local community in that, for a couple hours every Saturday or Sunday, or, during the week, the community will allow the market to use a parking lot or something like that. So, but that doesn't mean the community is helping run the market. They're recognizing that the market is great for the community, and it forms a community, and that you have members of the community that are congregating. And so many of you have been to farmers markets, but a farmer's market on a Saturday morning, you've got families there with their dogs and everybody's socializing and that sort of thing. We don't
That's
want too much socializing because they need to be spending the money in the markets, but nevertheless, it's just a really good vibe that's generated for the community.
totally. And the other thing about vendor-run markets is, well, yeah, sorry, you covered it. Yeah, I don't need to repeat that.
And for producer types, most of the markets, I believe, in this state are buy-in markets where 75% of the of what is sold at the market has to be produced, made, grown by the vendor. And buy-in means you can resell other product, such as well, Kelsey, you may be able to come up with some better examples, but there are some times a year, we'll say May and June, where it's hard to get a certain product grown in the state of Maine, and some vendors will bring in some other product to be
That's
able to meet the needs of the consumer.
so it still has to be produced in Maine. Whatever produce you're buying in still does have to be produced in Maine. You're not allowed to be buying stuff in from Massachusetts or wherever. So that's why you won't see like avocados or mangoes at a Maine farmer's market. But that extra 25%, that can be like if your group of vendors doesn't have like a strawberry producer, or if they don't have sweet corn, and there's something that will really get your customers in. Those kinds of markets will allow vendors to sit and they'll have to apply for it to the membership to say, I'm not growing this, but I have this connection. Can I bring so-and-so's sweet corn to market for these weeks of the year? Or it can also be things like t-shirts. Like a lot of farms will sell t-shirts. They're not sewing the t-shirts and printing them themselves, but they can sell them under that 25% buy-in rule.
Thanks. Thanks for setting me straight on that. And a peddler's market is more like a flea market. Again, it's not governed by the state of Maine rules, and it doesn't meet the farmer's market definition. So that would be people that are allowed to sell just about anything from anywhere. But we're really just talking about farmers markets here.
This all brings up there's this phrase that we say, farmers markets don't just happen. A lot of people don't realize how much organization and thought and rules there are to markets. You can't just show up to a market and set up, which does happen a lot. So
and the other point is too, the farmers market doesn't end, and most of the seasonal markets typically end around October, but it's not like nothing happens between October and when they reopen in May. The members of the market are meeting over the winter time. They're recruiting new vendors. They're tweaking any sort of bylaws they might have over the off season. So the thought process and the membership of the market really are engaged 12 months out of the year, and but they're actually only selling directly, typically between May and October. So that the types of vendors or members, a vendor member, full year established, they pay annual dues, and they typically are there from from May to October. And depending on the market, again, each market has its own rules, but maybe they're only allowed 2 to 3 absences over the course of the vendor season, because obviously, people can't show up, for 6 or 7 consecutive months, and so that allows for people to be on vacation or perhaps miss because of an illness or something like that. And the other thing is too, if you have a farmer's market with 20 vendors, you want to make sure that there's at least 17 or 18 showing up every week. You don't want it to suddenly a 20 vendor market to show up one Saturday or Sunday with 7 vendors. So there's rules about attendance as a vendor. And then a provisional member, if a new vendor gets accepted by the membership, and that typically is happening again in the off season before the market establishes. It's provisional. It's basically a 1-year tryout to make sure that the product they're offering works well with the market. Now, obviously, they will have understood what the member is going to sell before they're allowed to become a provisional member. But it's just make sure they're a good market member. And then a seasonal member, and I was referring, well, that's the next time. Seasonal member example is blueberry season, where someone will be a member of the market, we'll say for 6 weeks, because that's the height of the season of the sole or 1 or 2 products that vendor happens to be selling. And then day vendor, guest vendor, it's a one-off, meaning you can show up. It's typically a process where the market will maintain a calendar, and they may limit the number of guest vendors to 5 or 7, each week. And the market will typically have a calendar where the day vendors can sign up for a specific day. And again, it's a one-off or maybe a few times a year. But those vendors are also screened before they're allowed to sign up. So it's not like a random person can just show up and start selling something. They have to apply to be able to be a guest vendor or a day vendor. Do you have any comments to add to that, Kelsey, at all? Does that pretty much nail it?
You nailed it. And I can tell that you've been working in really busy markets. I'm up here in central Maine, and our rules vary a little bit. For example, like my market doesn't have any rules about attendance other than you must attend at least 1 market per season to maintain your membership. So yeah, and as far as guest vendors go, we don't even do them for our summer market, only for our winter market. And I'm not totally sure why, but every market is different is the point. So you'll have to check out the rules, and they'll let you know what they are.
And the bottom line is the markets are very welcoming. They might not be able to accept you simply because they just have too many people applying, but they are very welcoming because the lifeblood of the market is the vendors, and they want to make sure that they're addressing as many vendors as they possibly can.
Yeah.
And they're very protective. So again, if you're just going to be a guest vendor, they will want to know what you're going to be selling, how you're going to be selling it. They might want to see a picture of your tent. So, there's a consistent quality delivery of the people they let in for, just an occasional table.
Yeah, and they're gonna feel you out for customer service skills too, because they don't want people being mean to their regulars.
Absolutely.
That's the other thing.
So the consideration for vendors, well, there's basically 4 types of people that show up in a market: the farmer, a non-farmer food producer, which would be somebody that bakes bread. There's always a lot of bakers at markets, or typically a lot of bakers are people that will do prepared food. Non-farmer, non-food producer, that would be someone that does ceramics or something, sewing, what have you. And then a service provider. You don't see a lot of service providers, but I know an example of a service provider is Anderson Renewals. Anderson Renewals does replacement windows. They will, in many instances, be a sponsor of the market, so that kind of gives them the ability to pitch people on replacement windows. I know it's typically not the typical mix that you would find in a farmer's market, but that would be an example of a service provider.
And they're kind of a weird, that's kind of a weird one, because they're trying to advertise, and not all markets will allow people like that. But other kinds of service providers might be people providing a service to your customers. Like, I think there's 4 or 5 markets that have a knife sharpener who will set up, and you can bring your kitchen knives or whatever, ice skates, to be sharpened. So that's kind of cool. Or there's one farm that will take if you have sheep, they'll take your wool and they'll put it through their spinning mill and make yarn for you.
Oh, that's great. That's
Yeah.
great. And it may, oh,
Or
go ahead.
like a compost, there's a compost service that does some farmers markets too. A couple of different compost services.
And in many instances, the local library may have a table on occasion.
Yeah.
That's just kind of like a public service deal. And in many instances, the market will have some sort of small cluster of musicians, a guitarist, or just 2 or 3 people playing music, just to create a nice vibe at the marketplace. So some of the considerations for the vendors: are you sourcing local ingredients? We've spoken many times that that's the bottom line for Maine farmers markets is local, local, local. Can you commit 5 to 7 months of the market season? Now that would be for a vendor member or provisional member. Again, as we said, as a guest vendor, it can be as few as one market visit over the summer or once a month over the summertime. But if you're anticipating committing, it's really a 5 to 7 month commitment as long as the market is open, basically. And how can you help support your market? Again, being a good teammate and being a good participant with the market that you are to contribute to its sustainability. Okay, how to join a market. That's probably what you've all signed up for here. Set goals and budget now and a business plan. Now, this is kind of tough initially because you don't have a good feel for what you're going to sell and how much you're going to sell. But what you really need to, and in a way, you kind of back into it. You got to figure out what your expenses are going to be. And for the physical, the tent, the tables, we'll get into that a little further on. But you've got to figure out what you're going to be spending just to show up before you figure out how much product you've got to provide. But, how many markets do you think you can reasonably go to? Are you going to be a full-time or guest vendor? That's kind of dovetails with how many markets can you attend. And again, there are many vendors that participate in several markets. They might participate in a Saturday market, a Sunday market, and then perhaps some of the markets have midweek markets, typically in the evening. How many separate markets can you attend? Are you going to be full-time or a guest? What sort of budget do you have? And what are your sales goals? Again, the sales goals and expenses are going to be critical to your budget because nobody wants to go to a farmer's market and lose money. But you're also going to have to build a following to a certain extent. So there's a lot of stuff to think about. And granted, it will be difficult to budget initially. But that's why you're a good way to start as a guest vendor. Research the markets within driving range and select options. Now, we said earlier that we showed the map with all the markets on it. There's also a search within the Maine Federation of Farmers Markets website. It's got great search capabilities that you plug in your where you live or what your zip code is, and it'll show all the markets with driving distance between them. So you can figure out which markets are close by, and there's nothing like getting in your car and attending these markets to figure out what the vibe is, how busy they appear to be, that sort of thing. So there's some pretty basic homework that can be done. Fill out the application. Typically, you'll find the application on the farmers market's website, and fill that out and be on time. Because with many farmers markets, they typically fill up in the pretty much January, February, March timeframe. By that time they know who's going to be at that market, and also by category. Like they don't want a market that has you don't want a 10 vendor market that has 5 bakers and 5 farms. You want to have some diversity, so you have to be early in line during the process while you're applying. And also, this marketing of the farmers market, other vendors as well. consider sending or dropping products off to the manager or the board to sample. They want to know that, it would help your case and help your argument if the members of the farmers market, have a feel for the type of product you're selling. Another thing is too, many of the farmers markets will have some sort of event in the February-March timeframe. Might be a gathering at some sort of a social gathering, maybe at a brewery or some public space where prospective vendors show up and spend an hour together chatting with each other and just getting a feel for some of the prospective vendors, and the prospective vendors can get a feel for the existing vendors as well in a social setting. And then, oh, go ahead.
Sorry. At the markets I have experience with, there's an annual membership meeting where after all the application deadline has passed, the membership will read your application, and then you'll be invited to attend the membership meeting, and they'll want to see you and hear from you. And that's where you can bring samples if you have them. Obviously, if your product is only available in the summer, you're not going to have it in March, but that's where you can bring pictures or samples or just show more about your product. It's usually a very clear, this is the time when you kind of make your pitch almost. It's not a formal pitch and you don't have to dazzle people. They just want to get a feel for who you are and what you're bringing.
And then the last piece is follow up on your application, because the people that are managing the membership process at a particular farmers market have day jobs. That is, they're growing their product, they're managing their farms, they're managing, whatever their business is that they're selling at the farmers market. So so they may be distracted, they may miss your application. So just follow up to make sure the application was received and when you'll be notified. I mean, that's true with just about anything you apply for, not just farmers markets, but anything these days. Is just make sure that the application was received and they have good contact information for you. And what you need to join a farmers market: appropriate food and beverage licenses. Those are typically sourced through the state of Maine, and it's a little bit different for each product that's being sold, but it's very easily attainable to get that information. Liability insurance. Most markets require a basic liability insurance of the vendor. Again, it's not a huge expense, but most markets require liability insurance. There are very few that might have an umbrella policy for all the vendors, but typically you need your own personal liability insurance. You need a tent, usually 10 by 10. It's a pretty standard product out there. And importantly, weights, because I recall the first time I ever set up a tent, it was a windy day, and you realize it makes a tremendous sail and you don't want it ending up a quarter of a mile down the road. So when you buy the tent, there's typically weights that attach to each leg of the tent to hold it down. Folding chairs, folding tables, basically whatever you think you need to display your product. Cold storage, hot storage. That's pretty basic. If you're selling frozen beef, you're going to need coolers, not only to keep your beef cool, but you want the customers to be confident that the frozen beef they are getting has been frozen, and you need to give the purchaser confidence that the product has been handled appropriately. And likewise, as I said, there's typically prepared food people there. You want to have hot storage, again, giving confidence to the consumer that the product has been well cared for.
And there are
go ahead.
There are state laws about what temperature things need to be kept at for direct sales too, but we'll get to all that later. That's all done through the state. Yeah. So if you're selling frozen things or hot things, you'll also need a thermometer. that's kind of up to par to make sure you're monitoring that.
And I mean, the next two are basic: attractive display, attractive signage. That's sales 101. You want to have something that basically, conveys to the consumer what you're selling, and what the name of your farm might be, what the name of your business is, that sort of thing. And again, the other, if you're new to the markets, this is one of the things you can learn from the other vendors, or just walking through markets when you're doing your personal education on markets, is just see how other people present their product and how they advertise it within the market. Point of sale system and data plan. The tricky piece about this is, in many instances, people using Square or some other smartphone-based ability to take credit cards, you may find that the signals are very weak. And the biggest frustration as a customer at a farmer's market is when the vendor is trying like heck to get a good signal so they can run your credit card through. And then after a minute of them trying, you finally have to pay cash for the product. So you want to be able to accept cash in both credit cards, but be prepared, and ahead of time, you'll be able to know whether there's a good wireless signal there to work your smartphone, so you'll be able to take credit cards. But make sure you bring cash anyway as a backup, if the Wi-Fi is not available from whatever the facility that's close by, or there's not a good wireless signal. Marketing material, banner, business cards, a lot of times, and this will dovetail with smart selling, which I think is the next slide. You can't be frustrated when somebody spends 3 minutes looking at everything in your tent and then walks away without buying anything. You can't let that piss you off or get frustrated, because that's the nature of the beast. And many times the person will return before they leave the market and actually buy something. But if they're waiting for a week or so, or 2 weeks to buy something, it would be nice if they had a business card to be able to, remember who you are, what you're doing, or they can reach out to your website or Facebook page to see if you're in any other markets or that sort of thing. So marketing materials are important, business cards, and then a banner that kind of dovetails with attractive display, attractive signage, and then a small garbage can. That's pretty basic, but basically you need to set your tent up as if you were a store and have everything that's appropriate. How to succeed? Well, number one is have great products, abundant products as well. Be friendly and sales oriented. Put your phone away. This is a tricky one. Everybody has their own styles. Be friendly. Don't oversell. Allow people the luxury of browsing without being over their shoulder, hoping they'll sell something, or over informing the customer. And again, put your phone away. Develop relationships with customers. As I said earlier, the customer, many of the customers are repeat customers. So even if they don't buy something 1 week, they may buy something the next week. Or they just, you develop a relationship and they say, okay, and the customer says, I want to buy something from this person. So a lot of this is basic sales 101, but it's very important with the farmers markets too. You're running a sales business here. Collect emails, start a newsletter, ask people to follow you on social media. Promote your attendance at the market. If you have an Instagram site or Facebook page or something like that, allow people to know where you will be. Offer samples. Be helpful to other vendors and the market manager. You want to be a good teammate, and yeah, that's the bottom line, is you want to be a good teammate, helpful, and support the others. Be reliable. Pay attention to the rules. That's all part of being a good teammate. And then be ahead or outside of the season. Be anticipating what the market's going to be, what needs to be done ahead of time. as well as managing your off season. Any further thoughts on success as to Kelsey as a vendor?
Yeah, I mean, I learned everything I know from working for other vendors. And if you have room in your schedule, and maybe especially if you've never done customer service before, working for another vendor, it's probably only going to be like one morning a week. And there's a lot of vendors, especially vegetable vendors, people who have a lot, like a high volume of a lot of different products, could totally use extra help, even if it's just for a couple of hours on a market day. That's an amazing way to hone your skills, especially those kind of like those people skills of what do you say when someone's rude to you? What do you say when someone says like, wow, yours are so much more expensive than his? What like kind of feeling out the market culture and absorbing, learning by doing and learning by absorbing is a great way to jump into your own booth more successfully.
And that's a great point. Why is your stuff more expensive? I think there's a false assumption, false belief of people that aren't familiar with farmers markets that they're inexpensive relative to grocery stores. They are typically the produce, vegetables, everything are typically more than you'd find in a supermarket because but the trade-off is you've got better quality. It was probably just picked yesterday. And it's just better stuff. And that's probably the number one thing vendors have to deal with speaking with people that are new to farmers markets. Things are just a little more expensive simply because they're higher quality. They're more lovingly cared for.
People are being paid a living wage to produce them.
Yep.
Yeah.
Market's looking for new vendors.
So this is outdated.
Yeah, it's outdated. So
Yeah.
if you go through the screen to find what markets are close by that you would like to participate in, you need to contact that market directly because again, this slide was probably put together in the early spring, and as Kelsey said, it's probably not accurate right now.
This is probably from last fall, yeah. But since we put this together, we have a new matchmaker tool on our website too. So on mainfarmersmarkets.org, you can find the market vendor matchmaker tool, and there's actually a resource for you. You can get access to a spreadsheet of all the markets that are still currently looking for new vendors. So that's one way to browse, but I completely agree with you, Jamie. You've just got to reach out to markets directly, especially at this point in the year. December is really when you want to be looking to apply to join a market.
But I think to be a guest vendor, the window is pretty much open throughout the course of the summer.
Depending on the market.
Depending on the market, yeah.
Totally.
You want to speak to this slide, Kelsey?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I got ahead of myself there, sorry. That first link there is the market vendor matchmaker tool. You put in what you're selling, a little bit more information, and then you get a list of all the markets that are looking, and vice versa. If you're a market organizer, you can fill it out the opposite way too. So that's worth exploring. And then our organization has been around since officially since like 1991, and we had a print newsletter, and that was the way that markets shared information before this thing we call the internet, and kind of learned from each other. So there's a lot of older resources there that are actually really great for people who are total beginners to farmers markets. And then there's another link there, market best practices. That's more of our archive of resources. And then there's another page of legal considerations, and that's where you'll find resources about what food licenses do I need to sell XYZ products? Where do I get them? Who do I contact? And then also just what you need, like insurance wise, things like that. But the short answer for food, any kind of food licensing, is get in touch with the cooperative extension. They're the best. They handle everything for the state of Maine, the University of Maine Cooperative Extension. And each county has its own assigned agent, or you can just contact them generally, and they'll tell you exactly what you need and don't need.
And I can't stress enough how great the MFFM website is. It just reams and reams and reams of information about virtually any aspect having to do with being a vendor at a farmer's market and farmers markets. It's really a great, great resource. And if you want to speak to the voucher programs, that would be great.
Sure. Yeah. So most farmers markets in Maine now have different currencies. So we talked about, cash check, Venmo, or Square, a card payment. But then there's all these other currencies floating around. Depending on what market you join, they almost certainly already have at least one currency program in place. And if you join that market, it is part of your agreement that you will participate in their currency programs. So I think they're really awesome, but I'm very biased. I work for the organization that runs them. So Maine Harvest Bucks is our biggest one. It's a low-income food access program. It matches SNAP. So SNAP used to be called food stamps. So people who have SNAP EBT can not only spend those funds at the farmers market with local producers, they also receive matching Maine Harvest Bucks. So if you spend $10 on bread, ground beef, whatever, then you get an additional $10 to spend on just fresh fruits, raw unprocessed vegetables, and even seedlings that produce food. So it's a food security program. It's a anti-hunger program. It's an inclusive program that makes it so that a wider swath of Mainers can actually participate in these great community phenomena that we call farmers markets. And 1 in 8 Mainers receive SNAP benefits. The average person who's on SNAP gets just an extra $20 a week. So it really is just like a tiny amount of money that helps people who are in the most vulnerable financial situations. At some farmers markets, SNAP and Maine Harvest Bucks sales up to 80% of farmers' sales. And then, of course, along the coast and in the more moneyed regions, it's still up to 15% of vendors' sales. So it does make a big difference for the local community. For my business, it made up 20% of our sales last year. So it's a huge boost for us too. So that's Maine Harvest Bucks. And then there's Bumper Crop, and that's a workplace wellness gift certificate program. It can be a wellness benefit you get through your employer that draws from your employer's health insurance funds. So it's money your employer is already spending on health insurance that doesn't often get taken advantage of, but it's part of the contract. So we developed this program, I think, 7 years ago, so that employers can direct those funds that are just sitting there, and you get $5 vouchers to spend at the farmers market on any food. They're only for food. And then we also sell them on the side, just kind of like a gift certificate. So you'll see those circulating too. I love this program because it kind of breaks the voucher barrier. Bumper Crop is usually going to white collar employers who have health insurance plans. So we've got the low income food access vouchers, Maine Harvest Bucks, and then we've got bumper crop, which is can be anybody can be spending bumper crop. And then the last one is Maine Senior Farm Share, which you might have heard of. It used to be a program that kind of worked as a CSA directly with farmers, and that still exists. But because it's a state program, the administrative burdens are very high. It's a lot of paperwork. It's a lot of kind of chasing people down to make sure they spend out their shares. So we've started to take it over, and we've got it running at 22 farmers markets now, where seniors come and they get $50 in vouchers to spend on certain categories of food. And then they get to eat more fresh local produce and honey in the summer. There are some markets have their own voucher programs too. So you might find even more beyond these, but it is kind of another funny thing that you have to juggle as a new vendor, is keeping track of the different currencies, but they can also be a huge boost to your sales.
And the other great thing is, as you said, these attract new people to the farmers market who might not naturally go to the farmers market.
Absolutely.
So if some employer, gives each employee $50 worth of bumper crop coupons, people are going to use them most likely, and they'll show up at a farmers market even if they've never been to one before, and it'll introduce the world of farmers markets to a whole, different group of people. So
I got 2 new customers who are now regulars because of bumper crop last summer.
oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Okay, well, that is the formal presentation. My email is up there as scorevolunteer.org. Kelsey's is there from MFFM. And the Jimmy email is Jimmy DiBiase, who's the director of MFFM. If anybody has any subsequent questions beyond the Q&A that we will have right now, it looks like, do we have any questions at all? A couple things. Jasper, will this deck be available on the SCORE website?
Yes, it'll be
Okay.
added to our workshop library that you can share with clients, and anyone who's registered for this workshop will receive a copy of the slide deck and a copy of the recording as well.
Okay, and I am just running through some great photographs here. And Kelsey, I think you said some of these are your photographs, or?
Some of them, yeah.
It's
Yeah.
great.
It's
So
easy to take great photos at the farmers market. Everything is, it's beautiful.
So people can look at those in depth at their leisure. Any questions at all at this point?
Now's a great time for our if anyone has any questions. I do want to say thanks to the Maine Federation of Farmers Markets for helping us out with this. Kelsey, really appreciate the feedback here, and I just want to plug too, my partner works for the Portland Water District, and she gets some bumper crop bucks, and we always have a lot of fun visiting either the South Portland or the Portland farmers markets that
Oh, that's great.
utilize them.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you guys so much. Thank you, SCORE, for supporting small businesses like this, and for helping bridge the gap. Farmers markets, a lot of people aren't quite sure about us, but we're here. So thank
Yeah,
you so much.
absolutely. Well, I'm not seeing any questions in the chat, so we can wrap up. I want to thank Jamie for putting on a great presentation, Kelsey for assisting, and the Maine Federation of Farmers Markets in general for helping facilitate farmers markets throughout the state. And last but not least, I do want to thank our sponsor today, the Maine Technology Institute. Endless supporter of SCORE, and we wouldn't be here without them. And yeah, and if you didn't know about SCORE, real quick plug, we are a nationwide nonprofit partner of the SBA that facilitates business mentoring. If you need help with your business plan, starting your business, marketing your business, human resources, and more, you can find a mentor for free at score.org. And I want to thank Jamie and Kelsey for a great presentation one more time. Hope everyone has a great rest of your day.
Great. Thank you.